I have a lot of TV comparison videos to make before the holiday shopping season is in full swing, but this is the one that I think is going to mean the most to the most people. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and today we're going to pit the Hisense U8H against the TCL R655 6 Series TV. Will it even be close, or will one of these TVs blow the other out of the water? You may have already heard or seen a few things about each of these TVs and formed your own opinion, but I really think you're going to want to hear what I have to say here because, spoiler alert, I don't necessarily agree with everything I've been hearing about either of these two TVs, let alone in the context of a direct comparison. So grab a snack, get comfy, let's have some fun with this. By the way, like I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of TV comparisons I want to do, but I'm limited on time and I still have new TVs to review as well. So to help me figure out which TVs you most want to see compared, would you do me a solid and drop me a comment about that down below? And then of course, subscribing and ringing the bell will make sure you see the video you want to see the most when I put it out. Thanks as always for your feedback. I love it and I need it. Okay, here we go. So I know that what most of you want so desperately is for me to jump right into picture quality comparisons, and I'm going to get there. But before I do, we have to talk about the fact that the Hisense U8H runs Google TV and the TCL runs Roku TV. Not just because those smart TV platforms influence the overall experience of living with these TVs, but because they also influence the picture quality, which is going to be a big part of this discussion. Also, this is my shot at trying to make future TVs work even better, and you get to be a part of that. So, now that we all understand that we're changing the world here, let's talk about Google TV versus Roku TV. First, let me mention that from an everyday use perspective, I like both platforms. I think they both have their pros and cons, but overall, I prefer these platforms to those made by TV brands themselves. But what I want to talk about right now isn't about how easy it is to find the content you want to watch, or how quickly the streaming apps load, or even whether they support Apple AirPlay or Google Chromecast, etc. It's about how the TVs work on the back end when they run on a third-party platform like Google TV or Roku TV. With the Google TV platform, which we also see on Sony TVs as well as the Hisense U8H here, there don't appear to be a whole lot of restrictions imposed by the platform itself. In fact, if we compare Sony's implementation to Hisense's, we can see that there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms of what kind of picture presets can be used and what kind of picture adjustment options you can touch. And I consider that a good thing. That's why I tend to prefer Google TV or Android over Roku, even though I'd argue that Roku is a lot easier for the, shall we say, less tech savvy among us. I mean, honestly, if I were buying a TV for my grandparents, I'd probably get them a Roku TV because it's just easier to use. But there's an issue with the Roku TV platform in terms of how much control a person can have over the picture it puts out. There's stuff going on in the background that a user can't touch at all. And furthermore, some of the more granular controls that are available can't be touched unless you use the Roku app on a smartphone or tablet. Now, for a Roku TV like the TCL 5 series or 4 series, or even some of the lower-end Hisense Roku TVs, that's not a problem at all. In fact, I think it's a bonus because it helps keep things simple for folks who want simple. But for a TV like the R655 6 series here, or even some of TCL's higher performance TVs, I'm starting to see that limited access cause a few concerns for me and anyone else who really wants to get the best out of their TV. Let me show you what I mean. Now, I'm about to go a little deep into the tech stuff right now, so if you just want to skip this part and go straight to the takeaway on picture quality, feel free to skip to that section by clicking the timestamp link down in the description. But for the rest of you, my friends and fellow knit nerds, I think we have to start with brightness. I imagine that many of you already know that the Hisense U8H is, on balance, a brighter TV. But it isn't just the peak brightness for HDR highlights that's brighter. The U8H is just bright. It is brighter all the time. Now, whether that's good for you or not is something I'll try to get to in a moment. But for now, if we accept that the Hisense U8H is a bright TV, we naturally want to find out how the TCL 6 series compares, right? And figuring that out has taken up a lot of my time. Here's why. I'll start with HDR content for comparison first because, well, it's just a lot easier for me right now. I pulled up some of this HDR10 content on YouTube and ran it simultaneously on both of the TVs using their built-in YouTube app. The Hisense picture preset, again, this is for HDR, is set at filmmaker mode, though I got similar results with HDR theater mode, even though it was darker. The TCL is set to dark HDR, but here within this, we also have other options: darker, dark, normal, bright, and brighter. This seems like it would be a sort of backlight level preset, but if we look at the backlight setting in HDR, it's always going to be maxed out. So while it's nice to have this quick way to just brighten things up, maybe depending on whether you're watching in the dark or a gloomy day or a really bright day, this kind of goes against the idea of having a backlight control at all. Not only that, but within the dark HDR picture mode, it appears that there are limits on just how bright it will go. If we go to the brighter HDR setting, I find each of these selections here are brighter than the same version within dark HDR, which points to the fact that we're dealing with a sliding scale, like the goalposts get moved. And the issue I have with that is that you give up on some of the other accuracy focus settings that are set in dark HDR when you move to a brighter HDR setting. The color temperature changes. And so if you wanted the brighter average picture level, but the more accurate white balance and color rendering, you'd have to do a lot of work. And it seems like there's some limitations here that you will not be able to get past. So that makes it hard to do an apples to apples comparison between these two TVs. But I do feel like the brightest setting in the TCL's dark HDR preset does get fairly close to the Hisense U8H without skewing a bunch of other picture quality elements. So if we compare things that way, what we see is that the U8H is a brighter, more zingy, more bling-blingy TV. There's more pop, and it seems more contrasty too than the TCL. The TCL, by comparison, seems a bit more reserved, but it also looks a lot more realistic, which I suppose you could also call more accurate. The colors on the TCL don't seem artificially overdriven to the naked eye, and by the measurements I took, the TCL is indeed more accurate. But I don't think that accurate is what a lot of folks are looking for. I think a lot of folks want dazzle, and the Hisense U8H delivers a bit more of that than the TCL 6 series. In a side-by-side, I think non-experts would say the Hisense looks better when playing HDR content, at least from a sheer brightness and contrast perception perspective. The U8H, though, does have some issues that might unwind that enthusiasm. For example, in HDR especially, the U8H has a processing issue that causes shimmer in highly detailed portions of an image with bright highlights. This scene is a great example. When there's motion, you get this shimmer artifact on the U8H that you do not get on the TCL 6 series, and it's really obvious. Also, again in HDR, the U8H over-darkens some dark areas to the point where you lose some detail. You can see that in this scene here, where there's some detail to be seen in the shadowy area of this object that's not easily visible on the U8H, but it is on the 6 series. And this isn't a backlight problem. This is a processing thing because there is plenty of light surrounding the dark area. This is the panel clamping down on light output, not dimming of the backlight. That's HDR, but what about SDR? Still watch plenty of that stuff, right? Well, here we're playing the same SDR clip on both TVs. And again, we have to really work to try to equalize the TV's outputs due to very different picture settings options on each TV. Since we're not worried about peak HDR highlights, there's no information above 200 nits here. We're really talking about average picture level. How bright do we want this content to look? Well, it should come as no surprise that the Hisense can be a lot brighter than the TCL. But what stands out to me is that in the movie mode, even with the brightest setting turned on, this TV is not getting anywhere near as bright as it could. That makes sense for movie mode, but it lacks contrast somehow. There's not enough pop. Yet if I go into normal mode, wow, there's the pop. It's a bit brighter, and the perceived contrast is definitely much better, but also the color temp is way off. And there's motion smoothing, among other things I want to fix. So now we have to go and make most of the other settings available look more like they are set in the movie mode, including color temperature. And when we do that, we get a much brighter picture on average. But it took much more work to get there, and it's still way too blue. Like fixing the white balance is gonna take a lot more work. Turns out, best as I can tell, the best move is to go with the movie mode. Pick the brightest setting, then go into fine picture control and jack up the backlight. The white balance will still be a little too warm and need some adjustment, but if you do all that work, you can get an image that is pretty close in brightness to the U8H. Why it continues to take so much work to get to what I want escapes me, but you know what? I don't blame TCL. I think it's a Roku TV platform thing. I just wish it wasn't this way. By the way, TCL did not abandon Roku for Google TV and then decide to come back to Roku. That's not what happened. TCL is doing both. At least that's been their plan all along. I guess we'll see if it comes out with another Google TV after the bugs it experienced with the first version, but I'm betting they will. Anyway, moving on to motion resolution in general. The TCL R655 is better. It has smoother, more natural motion with fewer artifacts than the U8H, even without the HDR shimmer stuff I mentioned before. I honestly think that's enough said on that. As for blooming control, is one TV significantly better than the other? No, not in a meaningful way. I think both TVs have excellent backlight control in general, and I think both do a great job of mitigating most blooming. I went ahead and did the usual closed captions on letterbox bar test, and both TVs did a great job. Can more expensive TVs do better? Some of them, perhaps, but other TVs aren't a part of this comparison, are they? So I'm calling a draw on blooming. So after all of that detail, what's the takeaway on picture quality? The Hisense U8H is a more dazzling TV. Its juiced up brightness, juiced up color saturation, and very dark darks give it eye-popping contrast. I know a lot of folks who, if they saw these TVs side by side, would say the Hisense is the better TV. At least at first. It's more appetizing looking. And by that I mean, we watched a lot of content with beautiful food footage, and the same footage playing on both TVs looked more appetizing on the Hisense. It makes you want to eat the picture. But the drawback? It's not as natural looking. And less natural, in my book, means less realistic. The TCL is a more natural looking TV, and it can still dazzle you when it should. Not only that, but it doesn't suffer from overly darkened dark areas, nor does it have the motion shimmer we saw in the Hisense U8H. Its motion resolution is also more smooth and more pleasing to the eye. It's not quite as bright as the Hisense U8H, but it can still get plenty bright for most use cases. And for general image processing, the TCL is doing a better job overall. Now, as for gaming, first, let me just be totally transparent here. I think there are more qualified opinions out there about which might be the better TV for gaming from a deep dive perspective. However, I will say from a user standpoint, that I like some of the recognition and automation the TCL provided when I connected my Xbox Series X console. I like that it can go up to 144 Hertz. Other than that though, it's a draw. They use the same chipsets and have the same connectivity and the same slight limitations. Honestly, they're basically the same. And if it matters to you, when it comes to sound quality, it's no contest. The Hisense U8H beats the pants off the TCL R655. The TCL 6 series just doesn't have very good audio, while the Hisense has surprisingly robust sound. As for looks, take your pick. The central stand on the TCL or the versatile legs on the Hisense, whatever works best for you. And the last thing I want to point out before I give you my big wrap up is that the TCL R655 is available in an 85-inch model, whereas the Hisense U8H tops out at 75. So, which TV is best? Well, that depends on what you want. If you want a TV with a lot of bling and are willing to look past some shortcomings to get it, the Hisense U8H is arguably the more dazzling TV. It also has better sound and it runs Google TV if either of those steer you in a direction. If you want a more reserved or refined TV that has a bit more finesse, the TCL R655 is the better choice. It can also get very bright, but you have to work harder to get it to do what you want. And even then, there are some levers for adjustment that you will never be able to touch, so you'll need to be okay with that. Which one would I personally pick for my home? Does that really matter? Well, a lot of you seem to think it does. So I'll go ahead and say that for myself, with my particular needs and preferences that are all very unique to me, I'd go for the TCL between these two. But that should not necessarily be your decision. Weigh everything you've learned today in this video and make the best choice for you. Don't ever let anyone else tell you what your preference is or make you feel weird about what you like. In the end, these TVs are both winners in my book. Actually, I think as consumers, we're the real winners. They're both stellar performers at prices that are well below what you'd expect for the picture quality. I'll say this, it's nice to be able to have to make such a tough decision. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. What do you think of this video? Did I make you feel comfortable about making a decision, or maybe comfortable about the decision that you already made? Let me know about it down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and here's 2 other videos that I think you'll like.